Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this first all-day event in a long time, so looking forward to being part of it. So I am Lucy Shaw. I am immediate past chair of the Mississauga Board of Trade, and I'm also the owner of Nurse Next Door Mississauga, where we attempt and hopefully deliver to our clients, making their lives better one visit at a time. Today I'm going to officially welcome Rocco Rossi, the man with a smile. He always has a nice big smile. He's a successful entrepreneur, business executive, champion fundraiser, and dedicated public servant. Rocco joined the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, the OCC, in 2018 as its president and CEO, and is still currently president and CEO. Prior to joining the OCC, Rocco most recently served as president and CEO of Prostate Cancer Canada, and also served as CEO of Heart and Stroke Foundation, one of Canada's largest non-for-profits. His passion for public policy led him to stand for election, both position of Mayor of Toronto and as an MPP. Rocco currently serves as member of the Board and Audit Committee of Terra Vesta Industries, a past board member of the United Way of Greater Toronto and other charities. He's been active in the community. In fact, in 2012, he was awarded the Queen's Jubilee Medal for Philanthropic and Community Services. Rocco holds a BA, Honors BA in Political Science from McGill, and a Master's of Arts in Politics from Princeton University. Please join me in welcoming Rocco Rossi, OCC President and CEO.
Obrigado, Lucy. Thank you very much. Honored guests, your worships. I would like to start off by acknowledging that we are in the traditional territories of Hazel McCallion. And I say that with the utmost of respect. She was a great mentor to so many, and when I had my aforementioned suicide run for mayor in Toronto, she was very, very gracious with her time and advice, and sadly she wasted it on a very bad candidate. I want to congratulate the organizers for putting together this event, because quite frankly, there is no more important business economic issue than the talent crisis. There simply isn't. And when you think about, and the mayor mentioned that, cities are waiting for funding from other orders of government, and there are a lot of things that we want to accomplish on the healthcare side, on education, on infrastructure. All of that takes money. And that money has to be generated by a vibrant economy. And that economy cannot work firing on all cylinders unless all of the jobs are full. Now, you may have missed it, but just a couple weeks ago, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most important stories hit the newswire, and that is that for the first time, China's population declined this year. They're not alone in that. Japan, Western Europe, Canada, absent immigration, is an aging, declining population. COVID exacerbated the labor issue, but it did not create the labor issue. We have been seeing this train coming down the track for a couple of decades because of lowering birth rates, right? Since the time of Malthus in England to the Club of Rome 50 years ago and the limits to growth, there has been this assumption that population would just continue to grow and grow and grow and then eat up everything, causing the ultimate collapse of humanity. What none of those thinkers foresaw is that actually we would reach peak humanity in advanced economies, and then slowly, as advances happen around the world, throughout the world, as the liberation of women and making choices about childbearing came into effect, as the cost of childbearing and rearing rose, and as the other options in terms of lifestyles became accepted, this danger of peak humanity has been growing. We refer to Canada as a natural resource paradise, and it's true, we've been blessed by so much. But there is no more important resource than human resources. And how are we going to deal with that? To the question of today's conference, acquisition, management of talent. Now, a lot of people point to immigration, and there's no question, and I look forward to Minister Fraser's comments, that COVID slowed things tremendously, and quite frankly, the slowness in return back to the office, particularly of our immigration officers in the Government of Canada, is an enormous issue. Because sadly, much of the immigration process remains paper-based, right? You can't simply say, don't worry, this can be done from home. It is not happening from home. And we have a waiting list of over 2.5 million people who would adore to be in this country. For all of our problems, let us never lose sight of the fact, yes, we cannot take for granted where we are, and we have to work on improving things. But there are precious few countries in the world that have waiting lists of millions of people dying to get in. And we desperately need those people. But immigration alone is not the overnight fix. Right? Immigration is kind of like grating fantastic Parmesan on top of a fabulous pasta dish, right? It adds tremendously to the power and flavor of the dish, but it is not a substitute for the meal, right? Even if you're adding 1 or 2% of population a year through immigration, how do we deal with the 98, 99% of the people here, right? How do we maximize those opportunities? And so we start with a number of factors that we have to take incredibly seriously. Number one is interprovincial barriers, right? People often talk about the problems to free trade in terms of, trucks going from Halifax to Vancouver. When they cross provincial barriers, they have to change what's in the first aid kit because there are different regulations. And these things are, quite frankly, pains in the butt, but they're not economically life-changing things. What is life-changing is not recognizing the credentials. Forget about people trained overseas. People trained in other provinces not being recognized within the province of Ontario. Like, how ridiculous is that? If you are an apprentice carpenter in Atikokan or Fort Francis, Ontario, and you're working towards your certificate of qualification, your red seal to become a journeyman carpenter, and because of proximity and opportunity, you spend a couple of summers working construction in Winnipeg, the time that you spend working in Winnipeg does not count towards your red seal here in Ontario. Because years ago, some genius figured out that a 2x4 in Winnipeg is quite different than one in Thunder Bay. I'm not quite sure, maybe it's a metric thing, but it is madness. Labor mobility to make sure that we're maximizing the 98, 99% has to be forefront in our minds. That's the elimination of those barriers between provinces. It is recognizing those credentials, and it is encouraging people to be able to go where the job opportunities are and not put artificial barriers in front of them, right? So that's number one, that's a key thing. We also, and I love the fact that we have, both universities and colleges represented here among our sponsors, and that is crucial. And the education system is absolutely crucial. I love the fact that the Waterloo site really focuses on the co-op program, because one of the ways of ensuring that we get people into the workforce and productive from day one is ensuring that there are real intern and co-op opportunities as people go through school, so that they're able to hit the ground running and be productive, both for themselves and for the enterprises that they join. And we want to encourage those things. But we also want to encourage continuing to reinvent what education means. Because quite frankly, an education system that was based on the needs of decades ago, centuries in some case, that led to multi-year degree and this sort of priesthood of how you educate in post-secondary education, is not particularly well suited to a rapidly changing economy that has different skill needs and that requires people to upskill and reskill throughout their career. The notion of doing a 4-year career and, hey, I'm good, like I do now my 30-year career and I'm good. No, that's not going to be enough. And so schools are now thinking through, yeah, you may pay for 4 years or 2 years, but you may come in, do 6 months, go out to the work world, spend a couple years, come back, do a 1 month, do 2 months, and continually upskill. The jurisdiction that figures that out with its school system first and best wins, right? So there is work that needs to be done there. There is work that needs to be done societally on the stigmas that we've put on whole categories of jobs, starting with skilled labor and the skilled trades. And I do want to give a big shout out to Minister McNaughton, because he's been on this from day one. For multiple generations, we've been telling kids, and look, I was in front of a guidance counselor years ago, back in East York, that said, look, if you're really smart, we're going to figure out how to get you to university. Not quite so good, we'll go to a community college. And if you don't make the grade, we'll try to find an apprenticeship for you somewhere. And what's the net result of all of that? My plumber can buy and sell me 4 times over. Right? He's got a place in Georgian Bay, another in Scottsdale, Arizona. He runs $1 million EBITDA business. And if he doesn't like you as a client, you're gone, because he's got a waiting list out to Oakville. Right? Our economy desperately needs those people. When I talk to members like Ken Hardwick, the CEO of Ontario Power Generation, and I ask him, what keeps him up at night? He says, where the hell am I going to find my next welder, electrician, or boilermaker? The average welder at the Darlington Nuclear Refurbishment Project today is making between $150,000 and $200,000 a year, right? People looking for the middle class lifestyle, and those working hard to get there, should be thinking about the skilled trades, not just for themselves and their opportunities, but for what the economy is desperately going to need. Because you look at the average age of skilled trade journeymen across this province, and I don't care whether it's carpenter, electrician, welder, boilermaker, the average age is in the high 50s. We have a clear and present danger. And this isn't just government policy, it's not just the school system, it's parents, it's all of us. I'm a perfect example. I'm the child of immigrants. My dad told me from a very young age, if he saw me on a construction site, he would beat the tar out of me. Said, look, we came from Italy without school. We had to work with our back to put food on the table. But you're going to go to university. You're going to wear a suit. You're going to shower at the beginning of the day. And you're going to come back from work at the end of the day with clean hands. Right? That attitude has to change. It's absolutely crucial for the economy to do that. And that's not to diminish, it's not to say it's only one and not the other. It is both and. Right? We have to be real about that. There was a comment made, and Trevor made it, around equity and inclusion. You know, for years, for decades, we've been talking about equity and inclusion as a social justice issue. And it is a social justice issue. But it is an economic necessity. This should be the golden age of equity and inclusion. I'm not talking just about women, right? Or racialized communities. I'm talking about those with disabilities. I'm talking about those with criminal records, right? Because unless we are prepared to put people away and throw away the key, once they have paid their price to society and they come out, we need their skills. We need to give them opportunities, because every pool of labor needs to be accessed and encouraged. And we need to be upgrading those skills on a continuous basis, right? Because the change is so rapid. And it's not just there. It's obviously, as the title of the latest issue of Connect says, there are no overnight fixes, because there are also enormous issues around affordability and housing, right? You may want to attract people. You're a business, you want to set up somewhere. If they can't find affordable housing, if they can't find a family doctor, if they can't find, grocery stores where they can buy food and it's not a food desert, they are not going to be able to be there for those companies. So those issues are crucial as well. Flexibility, we've learned that we can do more hybrid, and absolutely we can, but we can't go all the way to the end of the spectrum, because we will pay an enormous price in productivity, right? The thing that early in my career where I learned most of what I know was actually being in the office and watching managers do both good and bad things. Mostly bad things, because the good things are pretty easy to learn from. It's the bad things. You don't get that on Zoom and Teams, right? We cannot train and inculcate culture and do skills as well offsite as onsite to build that sense of camaraderie. And productivity is absolutely crucial to our competitive future, and to be able to generate the dollars to deal with our needs. And I'll give you, because very often productivity, people hear that and say, well, what the hell does that actually mean? And is it just some hard-ass business thing where you've got to grind wages down and get more output out of people? No. No. We compare and contrast at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce the GDP per capita, the wealth created per person in Ontario, Quebec, and the 8 US states that border the Great Lakes, from New York to Minnesota. We generate in Ontario $6,000 per capita more than our colleagues in Quebec, right? That is a huge advantage that generates wealth that we can do additional things with. And hey, we could congratulate ourselves, pat ourselves on the back, till you realize that south of the border, those 8 states, on average, generate more than $20,000 per person in GDP more every year. This year, next year, the year after that. Think about that, and I'll fudge the numbers a little bit just to make the math easier, because our population is 14 and change. Let's call it 15 million people in Ontario. You multiply that by $20,000. That's $300 billion with a B every year that could be generated in Ontario if we just got to the average of the Great Lakes states. Just the average. New York State is actually close to $90,000 difference per person. That has to do with headquarters, that has to do with value added. The debate should never be about what do we set the minimum wage at. The debate should always be, how do we create an economy that has as few minimum wage jobs as possible? Because that is what is going to generate the wealth that we want for the economies that we want to build. And working together, we're going to make that happen. I'd love to take any questions you might have.
Okay, I'm not sure the third mic. I might have to turn this on. Anyway, you can hear me. So we will take some questions because today is about a dialogue. So let's start it with a dialogue. Does anyone have any kind of observations that you might have on what we've just heard? Or questions? Greg, try us.
One of the ways to get more women into the workforce is what we're starting to do with ECE and childcare, and we're going to have a desperate shortage of ECEs. I think there's 80,000, it's the shortage on here. I'm with Trios, we're a career college. I'm also partnered with a couple of community colleges that are on it, and I teach ECE in one side with my community college. I'm not allowed in Ontario to teach ECE as a private college. It's crazy. The community colleges can't put out enough of them. I think it's a desperate shortage. If we did that, we would enable more women to enter into the workforce faster, and we just figure out what the pricing ends up being to make this work as a reasonable career for people. So you talked about the priesthood on the one side, and you talked about the barriers on the skilled trades, but there's other barriers where organizations like the College of ECE simply don't recognize another world, and there's a lot we can offer.
Well, it's 100%. It's that the whole move towards governmental policy around providing more affordable daycare in general is crucial, because one of the things that we saw in COVID is a drop, the most significant drop in participation rate, i.e. the number of people in the economy, was actually among women. We went back to levels of participation in the economy that we had not seen since the early 1990s, right? 30 years of progress in women in the economy wiped out because, quite frankly, as progressive and woke as we might believe that we are, women still bear the disproportionate burden of child rearing. And so if schools are shut down, if there's no access to daycare, then they simply can't participate. And we desperately need and want them to. We also, quite frankly, want to take down barriers for those a little more mature in our economy to continue to participate. And think about tax policies that would encourage people to continue to work later in life, right? I would love to have an economy of Hazel McCallions, right? Who are going to bring energy and work ethic everywhere. Because you saw that during COVID. One of the things, and think about our tourism areas, Muskoka, the Kawarthas, Georgian Bay, a lot of the hospitality industries ended up getting really hammered as the reopening was happening, because it used to be that retired individuals might do 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours a week to supplement their pensions and their savings. And because of the complications and health concerns, et cetera, they said it's really not worth it. And taking those people, even part-time, out created enormous shift issues. And so you had a number of these businesses having to close or have reduced hours because they couldn't find enough labor. So you're right. I mean, I could spend all day on the different limits, and we have enough need for all of those solutions to be brought at the table. I mean, look, even the example I used around carpenters and the limits to geography, these policies were all created in a time of abundance, where then unions or the doctors, because the OMA is a professional union, if you will, wanted to control supply in the market in order to ensure that wages and salaries would not be driven down. But you run the actuarial tables right now, and there is so much need that this backward-looking policy of protect is actually going to undermine our economy and hurt the members of those groups that have been thinking that they're actually protecting their people. They are not, because they impact the economy as a whole.
Another question in the back of the room. Linda Martin.
Rocco, thank you. What a wonderful presentation. Very passionate, I can see. Question for you. Education reform is one of my lifelong goals, and you had mentioned in Canada and Ontario how archaic some of our, particularly in the university area, some of the practices are. I'm very curious in the field of medicine. I have a niece who's going down that route. She's not graduated yet, but the marks were, like at McMaster, 98%. And I'm curious what it would take to drop the marks, perhaps as a way of opening up the floodgates. To your point, having healthy bodies in a workforce is so important that as a province, if we can't provide that, it's another issue in terms of productivity. So I'm just curious your response to that.
Well, two things on the health side. One, and what's happened with the grades. One, there has been massive grade inflation. And this is not just sour grapes as someone who maybe didn't have a 98% average back in the day, you know, when 78 was pretty damn good. But that is an issue. But what really drives it is you constrain supply of medical schools and nursing schools, and you're going to drive up the average required to get in because it's supply and demand. So quite frankly, we need more. There's really encouraging developments with Toronto Metropolitan University and, you know, sort of medical school for the Brampton Peel area. I know that York University is pushing hard to get a medical school that would really focus on community health care, and so more GPs and family docs, because again, we create economic incentives to go to specialists, and a lot of health, and as someone who spent a decade of my life in health charities, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and having that close to the ground and early interventions as opposed to having to deal with acute care at the end makes an enormous difference around productivity and outcome and cost to the system.
Hi, Rocco. Morning. Great points. I've been in the recruiting business for close to 30 years now, so I've seen a lot of changes between job seekers' perception of work, about employers' perception of how to hire and so on. And one of the things that I've noticed, and especially in the last 3 to 5 years, give or take, and you probably know this too, and I wanted to get your viewpoint on this as well and how to change it, but that is that companies have put so many layers of processes to hire. And that comes from small businesses to large businesses. The larger the business, the more layers, the slower it takes. And I contrast that with the US, and you know, when I say US, it's just like two nasty letters to a lot of people in Canada. It's like, oh, the US. But I'll tell you, they move a lot faster. Hiring, making decisions, business-oriented. So I don't know if there's anything that, how we backtrack to where we were. Because while we've been progressive in a lot of things, from a business perspective, we've taken many steps back. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a recruiter in a company downtown, and I was talking to her about different ways of finding people. And she said, well, I'm going to have to talk to our president to get approval. And I said, why? You know, why? Just, you're in need, there's a talent shortage, and yet you have to layer on these processes, levels of authority, levels of whatever. So there's a cautiousness in Canada. There's people need to be careful. They're afraid of making mistakes. They're afraid of lawsuits. They're afraid of human rights issues. They're just afraid. And it's permeated in a lot of the business environment that I've seen. So your thoughts on that?
Look, it has long been known that Canadian culture, much as people in the rest of the world sort of lump North Americans together and they say, well, Canada and the US, we do have a distinct culture. We are a little bit more small c conservative. That's in business investment as well as choice. But what I will say is, and you know, as someone and so many of the people in this room make hiring decisions, one of the things in the war for talent, yes, you want speed, you want agility, but fit is so important. And thinking about building your culture is so important that, quite frankly, I'm prepared to spend a little bit more time to build and support the culture that I want, because long term, I believe that gives your enterprise, whatever it is, the greatest chance at success. And I see a lot more turnover within US companies than I do within Canadian companies. So there's a flip side to that. Do we have the balance right? I agree with you. I don't think so. I think we are slow in a number of areas. But I do think the importance of getting it right is worth going a little bit longer. And one of the management consultant gurus that I have a lot of time for was the great Peter Drucker. And one of his famous sayings was that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I believe that. The creation of culture is crucial.
Hello, Rocco. My name is Jason John. Everybody calls me JJ just because of the two first name conundrum. There we go. I feel it. I work at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, the Career Center, and I lead a team of individuals that connect with our employers to meet our diverse student population, just from hiring need, internships, and things like that. You were talking about credential migration. I thought that was a really interesting point, but I also find that we have a number of brilliant students that also connect with our employer partners and employers in general outside of the Mississauga, University of Toronto Mississauga's employer community. One of the things I continue to find, and having worked at another higher educational institution as well as this one, there's a number of students that come back and say, hey, listen, the interview went well, things went well, however, experience has been an issue. And we have so many great students that are studying specific degrees or programs that really highlight specific industries, yet that experience is an issue. And the reason I bring that up is, if you do a simple LinkedIn search of a number of people with different degrees, we see the nonlinear pathway that many people are taking. It's on average 7 or 8 different industries that people take. Just curious to find out from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce standpoint, even the MBOT standpoint, what kind of education is being shared to employers today to help them understand that students are coming out with all these experiences within their 4-year program, outside of co-op and things like that, and are still potential candidates, excellent future employees that grow. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that area.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't throw away as an aside the co-op and internship, because I believe firmly that that is a crucial tool. And like Dave Mackay at RBC and others, I don't think anyone should be graduating from an institution of higher learning in this province, in this country, that has not had a real, and I'm not talking go and get coffee, I'm talking about a real internship co-op opportunity, because more often than not, and we see that among our members, is that person ends up being hired by the company where they did the internship, because if they are good, people will see that. And it's one thing to see stuff on paper. It is very much another thing to work with them, see how the chemistry works. And so I would argue that we need to double down on those opportunities. And we also need to create circumstances where, because sometimes the reason experience is important on top of, as you well know, on top of the credential itself, is that even within a field, a specific company within that field, aviation, aeronautics, whatever, may have a subspecialty that without actually doing it practically, there isn't an automatic direct line from what had been taught to working there. And so one of the things, and quite frankly, I think community colleges have been better at it, with all due respect, than the universities, is be entrepreneurial enough that then the employer can come back and say, you know, great employee, enormous talent, but we would love to have this person have this micro-credential, because that's going to take them to the next level. And having an education system that can be iterative in that way is going to be crucial to success and help to reduce that. So to say, you don't have to make the full bet on lack of experience. We can start, you can see where there might be some pinch points or gaps, and then that person can come back, do a 3-month upgrade, and be back and be rocking and rolling, and it's good for the individual and good for the company.
Any other questions in the room? No? Yeah, sure. Of course.
No problem. Thank you. Hi, I'm Peter Hawkins. I own an international shipping company, a freight forwarding company. I have a question for Rocco, but I want to comment on JJ. One of the things you said was that they needed experience. And they're students. They don't have experience, or they have experience in their home country. I think actually you can't leave it with no experience, no Canadian experience. You have to ask, what experience do I need? What experience can I bring? You have to actually challenge that, and you have to actually, when somebody comes back and says they needed more experience, I think it's up to every person who is advising that candidate to tell them how to answer that question. That is a question of sales. That is not a question of actual experience. We're hiring students. Full stop. One other thing, you need to have, and Rocco has brought this up, and I think this is very smart, you need to be able to show the candidate how they can sell themselves, but you absolutely need the employers to understand what the credential is. And so you need a champion on both sides. So everybody here, I challenge everybody here to go back to their office and say, okay, I'm going to look at these candidates, and I'm going to look at them in the light of what they really have, whatever training they have, and what experience they have back home. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's not transferable. And now I'm going to come to you, Rocco. You described a really valuable, important situation here, and you
Mistake, I'm sure.
No, but you're a guy who has opinions, and I'd like to know what 3 things do you think should happen if you were the god of everything, and he probably is. So
Is afraid of that ever happening.
No.
And reminds me every day how far away I am.
What did I say to you when we're getting coffee? I said, I'm a little bit scared of you. But I still want to know, I would like to know, seriously, if you were the guy to make the decision, tell us 3 things that you would like to see happen right now. I'd like to know what that is.
Number one, I think there should be absolute labor mobility of credentials across Canada of domestically trained people, because for us to argue that someone trained in Alberta, can't deal with life in Ontario or needs to be retrained, I find that utterly unacceptable. We need to do a lot more on the foreign credentials, for sure, but I think domestically, come on, we either are a nation or we're a notion, and we need to be a nation. Number two, we need people back in the office in the Department of Immigration. I am sorry, the Immigration Department is not Shopify. The processes are paper-based. They cannot be done. They're still having trouble figuring out Phoenix, let alone handling sensitive immigration matters. And when the minister tells me, and we had him at an OCC event, he said, "Don't worry, Rocco, we're going to hire more people." I said, "With all due respect, Minister, I don't need you to hire more people in immigration. I just need the ones you've got to be in the office to manage it." So that is crucial to move the process forward. And the third is really around the work that the education system and society at large need to do around this mindset of, if you're really smart, it's university and then down the line. And that stigma, if I could wave a magic wand and make that stigma go away, that would be an enormous plus for the economy. So those are your three.
That house in Muskoka with your plumber helps.
Well, he occasionally invites me there, but I think it's because I pay him an awful lot. I feel like I'm part owner of that place after a renovation. Yeah.
Excellent insights, Rocco. And host prerogative, I'm going to ask one question myself, and that is this notion that of all these various challenges that we're facing right now, it's increasingly evident that we can't treat or try to remedy each of them in isolation. And the one that clearly comes to mind when we're talking about immigration is housing. And so how important is it that we do address these issues in tandem, that governments do collaborate on both, and the strategy forward for when we are struggling to find accommodation for people?
Yeah. First time in decades, Ontario in a variety of categories is becoming a net exporter of people to other provinces. That should be a 5-alarm fire signal that we've got some real work to do, and housing is crucial as a part of that. And I'm sorry, the Mayor Crombie isn't, and I'm not sure if Mayor Burton is still here or taking a call, but look, all levels of government share responsibility on this. Municipal zoning, quite frankly, has an outsized role in all of this. And societally, we need to step up and give the politicians permission and courage to do what is necessary, because I want to protect the Greenbelt. I want agricultural land because I love the thought of having farm to table locally. I want to reduce GHG emissions and reduce the carbon footprint of every individual in society. We are not climate change deniers. I want all of those three things. I want to have housing for the hundreds of thousands of immigrants that would love to come here and that we need for working. I want young people to have the opportunity to own real estate. There is only one place on that Venn diagram where all of those circles overlap, and that is higher density within the cities and towns and villages that we have. You want to protect the greenbelt? 100%. Show me that you can build density in the towns and cities that we have now, right? Because unfortunately, we have a circumstance, and look, I live in a fabulous home in downtown Toronto, where I have the right to buy my neighbor, tear it down, and build a monster home, but I cannot turn my house into a duplex because of exclusionary zoning, right? Because the regulations are set up in such a way that I got mine, to hell with everybody else. That is not acceptable. I am sorry. If we want to solve for all of these things, we have to permit, and I know we try to mumble with nice, gentle densification. Like, call it what you want. We need it yesterday. And without that, and again, we need to give the municipal politicians the courage to be able, and the cover to do that, because right now, with low voter turnout in municipal elections, homeowners, and particularly homeowners with opinions, have a disproportionate say in those elections. And if you're a councillor saying, Rocco, look, I'd love to do the right thing, but I'd be out of office next time. And what's the point of that? Well, the point is, if we don't get this solved, what's the point of being in office? Right? Because we're not solving for a crucial policy to our economy and to our well-being as a society.